So today's topic is literature review, basically as per the instructions and the introduction given by Professor. So basically, my focus today is to give you a basic introduction or basic overview of how to write your second chapter in your literature in your thesis or dissertation. And based on that, you can focusing in the latter part basically how to do a literature review, standalone article publication. So simultaneously, you can do one. You have to prepare. You can prepare your second chapter at the same time. Based on your second chapter, you can produce an article, right? So those two objectives are basically going to be covered here today within 2 hours period. Basically, we were basically dragged to finish. I have another commitment nearly around 1:45. So therefore, I have to definitely stop at 1:30, even though. But anyway, I'll try my best to complete the 4 things within this time period. If there is more things to clarify, basically, if you need more help or clarifications, you can contact me. I'm coming from the same institution from management faculty, so you can email me or you can contact me through Professor, or you can have another lecture in another day, right? So my hope is to give, basically my focus is to give 2 areas, knowledge on 2 areas, basically. I hope by getting this, you will be able to produce articles and ultimately, rather than just preparing your literature review in the second chapter, I encourage you to produce articles. Ultimately, our research impact and the university rankings can be impacted when you are able to publish very good articles. So, yes, I assume that there are more than 50 students. So if you can produce an article, so they are out of as an outcome of this workshop or with this lecture, basically we will be able to produce 50 articles at the end, right? So my hope is that, and my target is that. So I encourage all of you to publish articles based on your literature review and from the things that you are gaining from this lecture. So I'm trying my best to give the practical insights and how you prepare both your second chapter literature review at the same time how you write the article on them, right? So so before that, basically, I'm using so many software for that. So one, I believe, I guess that you might have known about this. That we have basically, there are so many software for reference management. One famous, two famous are Mendeley and Sotero. Both of them are open source software for reference management of your references. So you need to have both, right? I recommend you to download if you are not using that. Those two, Sotero and Mendeley. Sotero is open source and Mendeley is an open source, freely available. You can download from the web and install the two software for your management of references. If you are not using, if you are not aware about that, so I have already YouTube videos in my channel. So these are the links, and then you can simply hit these links and watch the videos and how to install, how to use and everything. This is very much easier, very familiar, very highly developed, handy tool for reference management, very easy, very less time needed to manage your reference. Very easy tool and very user friendly tool for management of your reference. Right. So, and based on this, I'm not going to talk about how to manage your references today. Basically, I'm going to use these two software for another purpose. Basically, how to use for the both of these two for the literature review, right? And also we have these links are for installing in Zotero, and for the Mendeley you have this link. So click this link and watch. And apart from that, you must have the database access login access. Unfortunately, we don't have a paid databases access right now. But anyway, the university library doesn't have. I don't think that even though we can have articles downloadable with the databases, we don't have a very good database access for bibliometric and literature review purposes. That's what I am going to discuss today. So basically, therefore, even though we don't have such databases, I'm going to tell you how to do that with Google Scholar and Lens.org. Lens.org is a freely available database, open source database, and this has handy facilities. Using these two, how you can do your literature review will be taught in this to our session. Right. So these are the articles that I've recently published, and all of them are literature review, standalone review papers based on my PhD research. Uh, so I had to, because I did it in an innovative way using the software. So my entire literature review chapter was designed based on the systematic literature review methodology. And for that, I have done various while reviewing as a partial fulfillment of my research PhD thesis. While doing while preparing, while writing the second chapter, then I simultaneously I did my separate article preparations and submission for the reputed journals, and they were published. And all these are these links to the provides the articles which you can access. You can simply hit them. These things and those articles, and you can have all of them, all these articles as basically guidelines or references for your article preparation, right? So those all these are standard papers. Then you can simply follow this. So therefore, I'm recommending these articles to you. And so as you all might have known about this, in order to do a research, you must have a problem, right? So how problem is created? Basically, in the introduction, you write your research problem, write about your research problem, right? So in that problem, what you need to emphasize. Basically, you need to emphasize the reality, right? The problem creates like with the reality plus the gap, right? So reality maybe it's a problem, real problem. You take for example, COVID-19 is the reality. So that's people were dying, and so that was the reality, right? So that was the problem, and people began to search new vaccines to that. So then, without having any proper vaccine, people died. So then, without having in the current knowledge any solution for that, in the current knowledge, people died. So then, without having proper knowledge, represents the gaps, right? So maybe sometimes we have contextual gap, we have uh, theoretical gap, we have empirical gap, right? So various gaps are there. So contextual gaps are there. For example, none of the country in the world have were able to find uh, vaccine or the solution for the COVID, right? At the beginning. So then there were a contextual gap and theoretical gap. So we know that the COVID is the scientific nature of COVID. So it's a SARS virus, right? So it is there in the literature, but COVID-19, there is the gap. There was a gap relating to the COVID, theoretical gap relating to the COVID-19. So therefore, people began to research. So basically, in a problem is created basically from the reality at the same time from the gaps. So how we can find the gap? So basically, in order to find the gap, we need to do a literature review. So that's the basic background in defining your problem in your research, right? So when you are going to do a research, basically you need to define the problem, and, introduce the problem, and we need to make a problem statement. And in that, basically, you need to highlight what is the reality of the problem, and at the same time, what are the gaps. because gap, when you are able to identify the gap, then you need to present that those gaps in the paper, in your thesis, in your dissertation, right? So how you can identify those gaps? So people normally, in olden days, people normally identified the gaps based on their subjective interpretation. They simply Googled it, few articles, they Google it, and just review them and identified, say simply that there were gaps, right? So that is purely a subjective interpretation. So how you can do that without any subjective intervention in an objective way? How you can do that systematically is basically going to be discussed here. So, right, basically my focus is to identify gap rather than just focusing about the reality. How you can identify the gap systematically, scientifically, rationally, right, without any subjectivity, right, by simply not but by not simply googling it, or by not simply subjectively interpreting the gaps. So basically, scientific methodology is applied here in order to find out the gaps. Right. So suppose that this is a problem, right? As you all are coming from, even though from agricultural background, you are coming from social sciences, right? So since this is a social science related research, for example, this has this is a moderated mediation model, somewhat something complicated than what we are discussing. Anyway, but basically, if you take these two relationships, we have independent relationship and dependent relationship. We have mediating and moderating relationship. So that's why I said it that as a moderated mediation or mediated moderation. So here, this one is moderated mediation model. So basically, so this is kind of a conceptualized problem based on the literature, right? So nowadays, this basically what is the problem of this conceptual framework? What is the problem highlighted from this conceptual framework? Employee engagement is the dependent variable. According to the evidence, nowadays, the world engagement level is very low, nearly 20%, right? According to the Gallup report, Gallup is an international organization for engagement and employee satisfaction. So they are predicting annually employee engagement. They are conducting annually employee engagement, stress and job satisfaction surveys, taking all the countries in the world, and they predict. They basically release a report annually, and according to that latest report, nearly we have 20% employee engagement level to the world, right? The world employee engagement level is only 20%, which means that 80% of people are not engaging their job, which means that they are physically in the job, but mentally out, right? Physically in, mentally out, which means that they are not contributing to the employment and organizations. They are getting the salaries and getting all the benefits from the organizations, but they are not contributing. Only 20% of people are contributing. This is the problem. 80% of the organizational resources are wasted, right? In that, this is the problem. When it comes to Sri Lankan scenario, so we are having nearly 37%, 27%. According to the latest report, we have only 27% of employee engagement out of the 8 million working population in Sri Lanka. Right? So we have nearly 8 million working population. Out of the 8 million, only 27% engaging in their employment, which means that nearly 73% of them are totally out, right? Out in the sense that they are physically in, mentally totally out, right? So they are not contributing, they are not innovating, they are not loyal to the organization. So this is really a problem. So this is the waste, this is the cost. So then this is the problem of this research, right? So in order to, this is the main problem. The employee engagement is a problem, and in this model, basically, how perceived disruptive HR technologies can be intervened into this problem was discussed and research in this research, right? So basically, those are the independent and dependent variables. The main independent variable is gender stereotype change. So I'm not going to talk about in detail about this, but this is the problem, right? So this is the problem. So based on this kind of a problem can be taken for you to study. And how I did. So for example, how you can review the literature. This is the prevalent reality, right? So only 27% of people are engaging. And when it comes to the world scenario, 20%, right? So to the world at the same time to Sri Lanka and to most of the countries, this is a problem, right? So then you need to identify whether what are the ways in which the employee engagement problem which has been addressed in the literature. So you need to identify gap. If there are gaps, because you need to find a solution for that, right? So if you are finding a solution, obviously you can increase the you can increase employee engagement. So when you are having a solution for that, since we are not having a proper solution and which has not been researched well, so still we are having the problem. When you go through the report, when you take the past 5 years record, it is significantly decreasing, right? So earlier we had in 2017 we had 38. In 2023-22 report, we have 27, 10% decrease in Sri Lanka. So the problem is having a decreasing. Problem is increasing, which means that engagement is having a decreasing trend. So this is the problem is severe, right? So that's the reality. So then, so during this period, people have not concerned about it. In that case, if they have concerned about this problem, find they might have finding the solutions for that. So otherwise, still problem is prevailing and evident. So then I just tried to look at the literature, how the researchers or the people reports have been tried to address this problem, and then surveyed some literature and identified several gaps, right? So what are those gaps basically? Uh, and so basically gaps were identified through the literature review, right? So basically why we are doing a literature review to identify the current knowledge, then you need simply, you can identify, you can understand what is, for example, in doing a particular research, you need to know about the definitions of this. You need to identify understand the dimensions, basically determinants. Conceptual understanding must be there in order to, when you have a problem. So initially, you need to identify. You must have a conceptual understanding, right? So and at the same time, you can understand the gaps, right? So what is the current knowledge and what are the gaps? So if there are gaps prevalent, the problem still exists. So that's why the problem still exists relating to this employee engagement existing and becoming severe, right? So 2017, 37%, 2022, 27%, now becoming a serious problem to the world and as well as to Sri Lanka, for example. So therefore, so without having any solution, since there was no any solution, problem becoming severe, right? So then, why it becoming severe without solution? People were unable to find a solution. So then, so how you can find a solution? You can take that into a research, right? So in that research, you are going to you are going to find out a solution for that. So this is the solution, right? A suggestion. So how you can find a solution? By simply reviewing a literature. So in the literature, basically, you basically identify the gap, and there are various other gap prevalent. So with since the gap prevalent, you can simply investigate those gaps. Then you can address those gaps through the research, right? So then literature review is needed basically in order to identify the gaps. right? So what is the reviewing literature? As I told you, literature review is an essential feature of an academic research. It is a written appraisal. What is the term here? Reviewing. So reviewing is kind of an appraisal of the existing knowledge on a particular topic. So basically, you need to address, you need to review. So what are the determinants currently having? So what are the outcomes of this? And what are the theories relating to this? And how, what theories, what are the related theories says about this? Right? You know, in addressing this problem, right? Employee disengagement. Engagement, if there is a high engagement level, that is no longer a problem. But the current situation, reality is employee disengagement, very low engagement level. So therefore, basically, once the problem is identified, in finding out the solution, you need to review the current knowledge. You need to review the current knowledge. Current knowledge are codified in the books, maybe in the libraries, in the reports. Various forms are there in the proceedings, right? In the knowledge, basically, in the knowledge bases, right? Knowledge bases are various forms. So basically, you need to access all those knowledge bases and find out what are the gaps, right? So basically, fundamentally, knowledge advancement must be built on prior existing knowledge. So you are going to develop a knowledge. You are going to create a new knowledge. So new knowledge can be created only we can identify the gaps, right? So how we can identify the gaps? Through reviewing the current knowledge. By reviewing the current literature, so current knowledge basis or the knowledge, simply we call it as the literature. So need to be reviewed. We understand that the breadth and depth of the existing body of the work can identify the gaps, right? So current knowledge, what is the breadth of the current knowledge? What is the depth of the current knowledge? Need to be a review, right? Appraised. And by doing that, we can simply identify the gaps. So to identify the breadth and depth, what we need to do, we need to summarize the current knowledge. We need to retrieve basically from the retrieving. We need to download. We need to access all these current knowledge bases, and we need to summarize them. And based on the summary, we can analyze. And by analyzing, basically, we can synthesize. Uh, we can synthesize the current knowledge. So when you are synthesizing simply means that you can have a overview, right? Based on the analysis. Then you can identify what are the gaps simply, right? And what is the current knowledge and what are the gaps? What are the gaps that need to be filled? So then based on their gaps, we can take them into more research and we can create a new knowledge in order to fill those gaps, right? So we can evaluate the validity and quality of the existing work against the criterion to reveal weaknesses. So basically, we can, from the current knowledge, we can reveal weaknesses, inconsistencies, contradictions, right? So we can simply reveal, appraise the current knowledge, weaknesses, inconsistencies, contradiction, right? So basically, in the review, those are the things normally by simply and we are supposed to summarize, analyze, synthesize, basically. So in analyzing, basically what we are doing is we can identify the weaknesses, we can identify the weak inconsistencies, and we can identify the contradictions, right? So by doing those, we can synthesize. So synthesis is a ultimately helpful for identifying the gap, right? So that is the basic background for doing a literature review. So basically, literature reviews are two forms. Basically, we can do a background review, which is done for an empirical study. That's what you are supposed to do. All of you are supposed to do at this point from Monday onwards. You might have selected a particular problem to research. And once a problem is identified, immediately what you need to do is to go to the library and go to the databases and knowledge bases and find out what are the gaps relating to the problem. And then the problem, so problem is a problem. So you need to find out a solution through a research. So then you can suggest simply possible solutions from the existing knowledge, which represents gaps, right? So that's what basically you are doing. You are supposed to do in the literature review. So basically, background review for your research, empirical research. Because, for example, in this is the problem that you have currently, right? So you simply by looking at the literature, by reviewing the literature, you identified these things. In reality as well, right? So these things nowadays we have people are having multiple roles. Both the husband and wife are working, right? So in a family context, now according to the 2017 family engagement report done by DCS, the Department of Census and Statistics, more people are intervening to the family activities. 58% people, 58% of working population people, men basically, right? 58% of men involving in their family domestic activities, but remaining the 42% only in intervening family domestic activities. But theoretically, literally, as we know, the female or the wife or the mother of a family is highly responsible for the domestic activities, caregiving activities. So that is that is a traditional gender stereotype. Gender stereotype is basically women are basically caregivers, are supposed to play the domestic and caregiving roles. Men are supposed to play the agency role, or in other words, economic agent role. But now the situation has changed, right? So with that change, people now, both men and women, husband and wife, mother and father, now working, right? Equally. We have now egalitarian gender roles. So with that, so their time is very limited. When gender stereotype is changed, so what happens? There is a work-family conflict, right? The work and family conflicts, because both husband and wife working, work interfere to their family activities and family interfere to their work activities. That is a stress. That is a problem. So with that stress reduce the employee engagement, right? So then there are, through deduction, there are findings. But we found that none of the studies address this problem. So therefore, we found so many gaps relating to this. So gaps identified through literature review, because we reviewed the literature regarding all these variables, and none of the studies have created this kind of a model and tested, right? So this disruptive HRM technologies are very new, emerged from after 2015. So then we tested how this can be intervened into this problem. So because this is a negative relationship, and so once the moderator is introduced, then this variables impact to this negative relationship is positive, right? So then significantly it was increased. The employee engagement was increased by 27%, which means that here I will talk about these things later on. So this is a problem, right? So this basically we identified none of the studies in the world have investigated this type of a model. How we can identify that? Through a literature review, right? So review identified none of the studies have tested this model elsewhere in the world, right? So none of the studies investigated simply means that the gaps, right? So that was done. So basically that is a background review. So we develop a problem, and problem was justified with the literature, and various gaps relating to this model identified, and that was done through the literature. And this is a background review, and also various conceptual understanding, definitions, dimensions, operationalizations were identified through the literature review, right? So as a you know, social science researchers. So these are the concepts. So how you can quantify in a quantitative research, how you can quantify these words. So these are simply a concepts. So how you can quantify. So these things were uh, uh, the ways of quantifying. All these things were identified through the background review, right? So basically, you are supposed to identify the determinants of this, the basically conceptual understanding, how you can define those things, what are the elements of these things, and what are the outcomes of these things, what related theories are, related to this each and every variable, and so what is the theoretical rationale behind these things. So everything need to be understood, right? So though all these things are normally supposed to be done through the literature survey, and through the survey we can review. In the review, basically we identify the gaps and justify the conceptual framework, right? So background review is that, right? So once doing a background review, obviously, based on the evidence of the background review, you can develop an article, right? You can develop an article. So that can be published in an index journal, for example, or maybe that can be presented in a conference, a symposium, right? So that's a standalone piece based on your background review. Because so much of information now you are collecting, analyzing, synthesizing, and you are criticizing. You can identify the contradictions. For example, if you take the definitions, right? So in this, for example, right? So you are supposed to find out the definitions, right? So in that you can find out that how the definitions have been evolved from 1970s up to in the last 50 years, right? As you know, every subject is subject to the every discipline is subject to the constant evolution, right? Constant development. You can simply identify how this subject has been the variable, or in other words, this concept has been evolved over the past history, right? So I took the definition. For example, I discussed the definitions and how those definitions have been evolved during the last 50 years, right? I will show you how I did that. So for each and every variable, you need to do that. So then you might have a very good understanding about the concept that you are going to investigate, right? So that is normally done in a literature review, right? So that is normally done in a background review. You can simply by, let's say, if you take last 50 years definitions on gender stereotype change, so that can be produced by an article. That can be, that can be presented by an article, a separate article that can be published. And for this, for example, that can be published. So these things are, these links shows the publications. For example, I published 5 publications. Out of these 5 publications, 3 of them were indexed by reputed journals, right? So this says the publication, and 1 publication and 2 publications, and by finally by incorporating all these, 1 publication was done, which is highlighting this model. So conceptual framework development, another publication. So basically, if you are doing this kind of a model for your research, going to be tested, nearly you can publish more than 15 articles from this, right? More than 15 articles, because from this I have published more than 16 articles from this model. All of them were published in highly indexed journals, right? So that's the focus. That must be your focus. While doing your research, you must publish your work. Then your impact is very high, and at the same time, university ranking will be going up, right? So because ranks are normally, universities are ranked by research. So therefore, you can increase your publications at the same time individually. So this is background review, and so your background review, which is in other words your second chapter, for example, literature review chapter. So based on that chapter, you can produce an article. right? So those two things are, as I told you in the beginning, so those two are the basic focus of my lecture today. Right. So basically, so we can now we can do the literature review scientifically or in a subjective way. So this is the traditional subjective narrative review, right? Or variety of styles are there. No defined method. Anyone can use by by their own method. Simply Google it by several. Simply you can select a topic based on your research project or research conceptual framework based on your problem. You can simply type the keywords in Google and find out several articles, and you can conceptualize it. You can find definitions, and you can find out the dimensions, and you can find out the determinants and outcomes, and you can simply develop. So this is purely a narrative. This is purely a subjective, right? But nowadays, not nowadays, earlier it was there, but now becoming very popular these days, systematic literature review. So how this traditional review can be done systematically? This is purely a quantitative scientific, right? So it is normally we have nowadays there are some institutions in the world, famous institutions, which recommend a structured, uniform approach for doing systematic review. One uniform, famous approach is the Prisma framework, and you are supposed to use that Prisma framework and highly recognized and recommended for systematic literature review. These are that maintains rigorous nature of the literature review, and it is a synthesis, right? So basically, as I told you, every literature review is a synthesis. We are supposed to do a synthesis and find out the gaps. But this in this systematic literature review, basically we are doing it scientifically, synthesizing our knowledge scientifically, and by synthesizing, we are supposed to identify the gaps. And it really helps for meta-analysis, which is meta-analysis is another form of scientific way of analyzing the current knowledge. I'm developing these days another software for this, and soon, around before ending of this year, I will be able to launch it, and I will be doing meta-analysis session later on, right? So I'm now these days I'm developing how we can do that meta-analysis. So basically, meta-analysis is not a systematic literature review; it's a form of a literature review which is purely scientific, which is purely quantitative, right? But for the systematic literature review, even though it is scientific, quantitative, we are not going to use high-end mathematical techniques like correlation, meta-analytics, structural equation modeling. There are so many mathematical techniques for doing that. But systematic literature review, we normally use thematic analysis, right? So how we can do that, and how this systematic literature review is helpful for your literature review chapter, right? And then based on that, how you can publish will be discussed, right? So now think about your model. For example, suppose this is you are going to test a simple uh, independent and dependent relationship, right? For example, the most common one is how the job satisfaction can be increased. Job satisfaction, simply we can say that rewards, right? Rewards X variable, Y variable is job satisfaction, right? So there is a positive relationship. So this is the model in Sri Lankan context, for example. So this is what you are going to do, for example, right? So in that, how you need to define, how you need to, what you need to incorporate, what basically you need to include in your literature chapter, in the second chapter, right? So what do you need to write about in the literature chapter, basically, if you are taking this, right? Uh, so you have simply independent and a dependent variable, right? Uh, so then what? So how you frame this? How you frame your literature review chapter? So what are the contents? I will tell you how to do that. Right. The second chapter in the literature review. So basically, this is how I am writing my literature chapter. The various books recommend the various styles, but when you are following a systematic literature review methodology, I think the most the ideal or the recommended the guidelines or the titles are these, right? So this has a logic, right? So this has a logic basically, because everything because we are following a scientific method, we are following a rational method, and based on that, we need you are supposed to frame your literature review chapter scientifically and rationally. So when you follow this kind of gu- guidelines or basically titles, when you are able to uh, arrange your literature chapter content like this by using these titles, then its scientific nature and its logic is, I believe, will be very much high. Right. So basically, so introduction need to be written in that. Basically, as you normally know, so what are the contents of this chapter and what you are going to do in this chapter? Basically, introduce in the literature reviews chapter. Basically, you need to introduce the chapter, right? And what are the contents and what you are going to do this in this. And basically, as I told earlier, then if this is the model, right? So X variable, you can simply define the variables first, right? So you can definitions of study variables, right? So and basically, you need to find the definitions now. I will tell later on how to find these things using software and using databases. Basically, you need to write the definitions, right? Regarding at least last 10 years, last 50 years, definitions evolution in a chronological order from 1970 to 2023, last 2020, last 50 years, how the definition evolved, right? So basically, at least you need to summarize in a table what are the definitions given by different authors and different scholars, right? Need to be find out, need to be found basically. Uh, then and then so that can be done under 2.2. Then after that 2.2.1 you can review basically, right? So you need to can have at least a review. You need to identify what are the weaknesses and what are the contradictions and what are the similarities. All these can be done in a one paragraph basically, right? So simply you are supposed to do a review and you can simply identify the gaps as well, right? If like let's say all these things need to be done according to your research questions. If let's say, for example, if there is a research question to identify the gaps in basically the definitions and concepts, so obviously you can do this review, right? So otherwise, you can simply, in order to maintain the logic, because this literature review chapter need a review, not a survey, not an information. It must contain a review. Everything what you are going to write in the literature chapter need to be reviewed. In the review, what you are doing, what you identify similarities, you identify the contradictions, you identify the let's say simply gaps, right? So you need to do a review for the definitions, and then after that, the y variable. Y is the dependent variable. Your problem, basically, problem always represents the y variable or the dependent variable. So in a dependent variable, normally you need to highlight your problem, right? So then you introduce that y is your dependent variable. At least in this, under this, in the 2.3, you need to introduce your dependent variable in a one paragraph, for example. Then 2.3.1 subheading, you can simply write out the determinants of the dependent variable. For example, in this case, your dependent variable is y. So then simply you can identify what are the other independent variables. right? What are the other independent variables of y? So we can't say that according to the theory. You need to find out the theory, current knowledges, whether only rewards can increase the job satisfaction. So there are some other ways according to the current knowledge bases. So there are rewards, basically rewards financial, non-financial. Out of these financial, non-financial, there are various other factors already found out by the scholars and researchers which are in the knowledge bases. So that's what we are supposed to find out the literature, right? So then you can identify the determinants, simply determinants, and check whether X, this, what you are going to test is addressed by the researchers and how many, basically, right? So let's say one variable, you are thinking that, let's say your children, suppose you are married and your children is impacting your job satisfaction. You assume that, you suppose that, and you can see that it is in a reality. And you simply find out whether this has been researched. But this is in the reality, right? So this is normally happening in the reality. But you need to find out whether this has been addressed by the researchers elsewhere. So that's why you are supposed to go to the knowledge bases in the literature survey. So in the survey, that's what you are doing, right? So now, while finding other variables, your target is to find out whether this variable, this children variable, has been investigated to impact the job satisfaction, right? So then in your review identified that no one studied, maybe only one study, maybe only one study, maybe in Pakistan, one researcher has been studied this and he found that there is a positive impact. More children, more job satisfaction. Less children, less job satisfaction. Suppose this is an example, right? So, so one study, and there are no other studies found through the literature review, through the literature survey. So then you simply review it. How you can review? There are so many other findings. Other, let's say you found out nearly 25 determinants. Out of the 25 determinants, let's say this has been researched. Let's say X variable. What you have, this is the X variable that you are going to predict. And suppose the X variable represents X variable is this one, right? X variable is children. And you found, let's say, another variable, A variable, B, C, D, E, F, likewise. A has been researched 90 times as determinants. B has been researched 25 times in the research, right? So they have been researched, which is determining the job satisfaction. Likewise, you can have a frequency table, and that can be presented in your literature review chapter. So that is done, determinants of y, right? And simply another section can be incorporated. So through 2.3.2 review of determinants. In the review, what you need to write about, so you can say simply the gaps, right? So you simply say that A variable research 25 times, B variable research 30 times, C variable researched 150 times to determine job satisfaction. But only one variable, which is called children, has been researched only once, which is in Pakistan context, taking a sample of 200 employees, found that found that children positively impacting job satisfaction. So that's what you are supposed to review, right? So simply highlighting a gap. Because only one study has been investigated, one study cannot be generalized. Through one study, you can't generalize, right? So many other studies need to be done in order to generalize this finding. So that's why we say that one is not enough for because only one context. There is a contextual gap. Sri Lanka, we are doing this research in a Sri Lankan context. So therefore, Sri Lanka, we can't find this kind of a finding. So there is a contextual gap. And in the literature, there is an empirical gap. Only one study have been conducted. So which means that one study is no longer enough for the generalization. In that case, so we say that there is an empirical gap, right? So and there is a knowledge gap at the same time. So we don't know whether even let's say we can't rely on this finding because only one study has been conducted. We don't know. So therefore, so there is a gap in the knowledge as well, since there is low generalizability. So knowledge gap is there, theoretical gap is there, and sometimes maybe so no theory addressing this. So we have a job satisfaction model by Spector 1936. Spector's model, job satisfaction. So Spector identified nearly Moblay's model is there. There are various job satisfaction models by the research, models developed by the researchers. None of these models address this children variable in their models determining job satisfaction. So then there is a theoretical gap, right? So therefore, basically, you can identify knowledge gap, empirical gap, theoretical gap, and the contextual gap. Basically, 4 gaps can be identified, right? So that must be presented here under the review, right? That must be presented under the review. Right? So review of determinants. So that can be mentioned in this paragraph. You can open up a few other paragraphs if you if you want to tell more, say more. Right. So likewise, for each and every variable that you are taking for your investigation need to be explained like this. Then after doing the dependent variable, after writing about the dependent variable, then you can write about the independent variables. Independent variable. So how you can, then you can simply independent variable. You need to take these are independent variables, right? That you are taking. For example, x variable is the independent variable. Then you can simply find out the outcomes of independent variables, right? Because you are going to test whether this impacts, whether this is impacted by this variable. Simply, then you can find out what are the other outcomes, right? And you can summarize in a table. Let's say if I, J, K, L, M, N, and O. Likewise, you can find several 10 or 15 or 20 or 55 or 60 or 100 outcomes. So that can be summarized in a table and with the frequency and sources of investigations, right? And then you can simply identify whether this variable, job satisfaction, because in our study, job satisfaction is the target variable or dependent variable, which is an outcome of this variable. So in that case, you can say that simply out of this investigation, out of this review, you simply can, if you can find none of the studies have identified this variable as a dependent variable for this, then you can simply say that there is a gap. Likewise, I mentioned for the dependent variable, same gaps you can mention. Theoretical gap, knowledge gap, contextual gap, and empirical gap. If it is not empirical investigated with a large sample, there may be sometimes conceptual papers, opinion papers, viewpoint papers, perspective papers, but there may be bloggers' perspectives, right? So we have, I believe that you know what is a blog, right? We normally can have a blog post on the web, right? So in my blog post, I normally say in that this gender stereotype impacts changing gender stereotype impacts employee engagement. In my opinion is normally posted. My Facebook normally my opinion is posted, right? Then you review that. But it has not been empirically proven, right? So that's why we say that empirical gap. Empirical investigate, normally there must be a scientific method. At least a larger sample must be there. Research methodological tools must be utilized in order to investigate that particular variable, right? Whether it's a positive or negative impact, or whether there is an outcome or a determinant or a mediating impact or moderating impact. So anyway, in order to test this, at least you must have a good research methodological approaches in a empirical research, right? So if there is no such, then you simply say that empirical gap is there. Right. So likewise, you can frame the dependent and independent variable and include information like this. So in the review, those things need to be written. And then you can find out the related theories relating to this variable. For example, you can find out what are the theories. Let's say, so these are the variables, two variable. What theory is highlighting or supporting this relationship, right? So what theory is suggesting this relationship, right? So since our variable is this one, children impacts the job satisfaction, you simply try to understand, you simply try to find out whether which theory highlighting this impact. If there is, then you simply can mention. If there is no, you can simply can mention that there is a gap, theoretical gap, right? So that need to be, theories need to be, related theories need to be at least, basically you need to mention what this theory says about. You need to describe A theory, B theory, or C theory. There may be no unified theory addressing addressing your model. So in that case, you need to combine two or three theories. You need to consider about one or two theories, right? So initially, you need to write about those theories, basic description about those theory and how the variables, what are the variables, what are the elements of this theory and how it determines. And likewise, you need to basically introduce the theories under the related theories. If you say suppose that you are going to use two theories, A and theory and A and B, you need to write about these basic theories briefly, right? At least two or three paragraph can be used. At least maximum one paragraph is enough. And 2.251, then finally, after writing about those theories, then you can review about the theories. Basically, you can highlight the gaps, right? So basically, you can highlight about the gaps, as I told you. Then this is not needed. Then after that, based on all these, then you can develop your conceptual framework. You can write about, draw your conceptual framework and explain by using these information briefly, at least one or two paragraphs. If there are two variables, so two paragraphs is more than enough, right? So then based on that, you can simply develop hypotheses. So normally people are used to use basically to write about the conceptual framework and hypothesis development in the third chapter, methodology chapter. But I recommend, according to my understanding, since we are logically arranging everything, because we have already written logically, right? So the logic need to be maintained further. Then based on these information, up to this point, you develop your conceptual framework, right? So because you are justifying everything from here onwards up to this point. So then by using all these information, you develop your conceptual framework and explain it. And based on that explanation, you can simply develop the hypothesis, right? So for the hypothesis development, at least you need to open up a few paragraphs to justify the relationship. You are using two, let's say, two variables in your model. So let's say x and y. X determines the y, right? Or, x impacts on y. So that is the hypothesis, right? That is supported by the theories and the prior research studies, because you have mentioned in the review that if there are no related, if there are no research findings elsewhere done, then you can simply write based on the theory. The theory can be through deduction. There may be sometimes directly relevant theory. There may be no any directly related theory. So through the deduction, you can simply relate other theoretical underpinnings to relate your to support your predicted impact. So in that case, basically develop your hypothesis based on the theory, and at the same time, if you have at least one study conducted, or maybe sometimes you can support, maybe even though there are empirical gaps, there may be some other bloggers perspective papers, opinion papers, maybe sometimes viewpoint papers, perspective, right, conceptual papers. By taking those which are supporting your relationship that you are proposing to investigate, so basically can be backed by those findings, or can be backed by those information plus the theories, relevant theories. And at least without them, you can't develop hypothesis. So therefore, basically, at least you need to have evidence that there is a relationship from the reality itself. For example, even though a particular reality existing, whether this variable, X variable impacts on Y, so reality must be proven with evidence, right? Proper evidence with proper strong citations. You need to provide. You need to provide those things, right? So basically, so that's how you can develop your theories. Sorry, develop your hypothesis. Basically, to summarize, hypothesis must contain evidence, proven evidence, at least with citation, uh, theoretical underpinnings plus practical underpinnings with citation, right? So you need to cite them at least a few articles to support your few theories or few investigations or few information, practical evidence, proven evidence to support your hypothesis. Right, so that's how, because you have sufficient information you mentioned in those sections, and by taking all these, simply you can develop your hypothesis. And then finally, in the 2.8, you can develop you can simply summarize your literature review contribution to your current study, right? So because this is kind of a review again, you can summarize. You have reviewed here these things, and you have reviewed this one as well, and you have reviewed outcomes as well, and you have reviewed gap theory as well, right? So those reviews can be summarized here, and this is what is your contribution. Basically, this is your contribution because you reviewed in this chapter for the sake of your study, right? So these reviews can be summarized here under the literature contribution to the current study. So this is your current contribution. At the same time, you can produce, for example, you can produce these as a separate article which can be published in an index journal, for example. This is another index journal publication, another index journal publication, another index journal publication. And all these can be summarized here under this, right? A cited, B cited, C cited, D cited, E cited. So these are your publications, proven evidence, right? And this can be further, for example, and this can be further cited in the hypothesis development because all these things are already published. And these are the citations normally that can be done under the hypothesis development. Because you reviewed and you developed a hypothesis. You reviewed and you published it. You published your gaps, right? So that's why that's how I did, for example. So I did, let's say, I will tell you later on. Right? For example, this is one of my article which highlights when it comes to the gender stereotype change, right? For example, this is gender stereotype change. This one, the variable. And for this, I reviewed past 50 years definitions, right? And that was published. Here, this is the publication. So this is Scopus, ESI, CAPS, APDC, stage publication, right? So you can find this article from this link and from this DOI number. And since, because I took the 50-year period, but the definitions according to the literature knowledge bases, I was able to find out from the definitions from 1978 until 2020. Right? Then you can simply put a review here. So how you can say, by looking at this, you can simply understand by reading it. So what are the basic ingredients of definitions highlighted in those definitions? And by looking at this, you can identify whether there is a pattern, similarity, differences, contradictions, and those can be highlighted here. So that can be, if this is published, then people will cite, right, your criticism as another definition. So that's your contribution. Right. So likewise, you can find various, I take this one, right? Here you can see the facets of gender stereotype change, the systematic literature review. Right. So in this article, basically highlighting all these things relating to the gender stereotype change, definitions, dimensions, determinants, theories related, right? So all these things highlighted, facets, informations about gender stereotype change. So that was done for the basically background review, and that was published as a separate article, right? So, and when you go to this one, let's say this one. So this is the three perspectives. So this is gender stereotype change outcomes, right? A systematic literature review, systematically done this review. Outcomes, because gender stereotype, because I investigated the outcomes. Here you can see, because these are the outcomes, right? I tested whether, I reviewed whether, I surveyed basically and reviewed whether these variables have been investigated elsewhere in the world. Then I found that none of the study has been investigated these variables as they are as the outcomes of this variable and published that. Right? So that's how I established the gaps. Right? So those are the gaps identified. Basically, gender stereotype change by taking 75 articles systematically, right? And they were published in those. This first publication, as I told you, I had 5 publications. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? So these highlighting the basic ingredients or the facets of gender stereotype. Basically, in one article, outcomes, in one article, definitions, one article, dimensions, and another article, only. Right. So then, so this was done, right? And work family conflicts is the another variable in my model. Then I took 420 articles and that was published. And for this 62 articles, and for this, according to the research investigator, that the number may be dependent on, right? According to the research, according to the area because sometimes if you take a new subject area to investigate, there may be very less articles published. Since this is work family conflict is a common area investigated, then you can find more articles, right? Employee engagement is a common practice, common research area. Then you can find, if you take motivation, something like that, So then you can find around 1,000 or 2,000 articles, which are high quality, right? So you can basically need to screen out, and there are inclusion and exclusion criteria. So when you Google it, nearly 120,000, maybe millions and millions list of articles generated. Out of this, you can find out, you need to find out the best articles, very good articles, which followed high quality methodology, right? So by doing that, I found to do 75 over 120. I will tell you how to do that. So these are the articles taken and published and identified gaps, basically knowledge gap, right? Relating to those things and theoretical gap. You can mention this table in your problem statement, right? As I told you, simply you can mention here in the problem statement. You can mention the reality and the gaps. You can simply mention this table in your first chapter under the method problem statement or problem definition, right? Right. So now, so how we can do this, all these things through this methodology, systematic literature review, right? Systematically. So systematic literature review, all these, as I told you, the entire review process is done systematically, without any bias, without any intervention, subjective intervention by the reviewer or by the author, by the researcher, by you, for example, right? Not no subjective interpretations, no subjective searching. Subjective searching simply means that you directly go to the what do you call this? You directly go to the Google and enter, let's say, job satisfaction. You enter this word in the search engine, and there are 150,000 articles generated, and you simply normally nearly 20 articles, 20 items normally, or 10 items normally by default generated by the Google interface. Normally at a time, there is a what do you call this? There is a function to select the number of items generated in a page on Google. So 10 items can be selected or 20 items can be selected. If 10 items have been selected, you can only view 10 items per page, right? If 20 items per page is already been selected, then 20 items per page is visible. You simply look at the first page, and you simply to find 2 or 3, 5 downloadable articles, and simply go through, and you simply pick some important definitions, 2 or 3, and write. So that's what you normally do. So that is purely subjective, right? That is purely subjective. We need to do it in an objective, scientific way. And this is really systematic literature, right? And so there is a methodology for doing the systematic literature review. We need to follow steps, nearly 8 steps need to be followed. So it's very hard to tell all these things in detail in a 2 hours time, but I'll try my best to I'm trying my best to give the basic things that you supposed to do. And if you need, I have so many other videos relating to these things in my YouTube channel, and I will provide the channel information, and you can watch them and you can subscribe them regularly. And this one also, this recording also will be uploaded to my YouTube channel, and you can watch them. And time to time you can in your leisure times you can watch and learn. And basically, there are so many other research related how to write your methodology, how to write your literature review, how to write your first chapter, and some analysis using SPSS. All these things are included in my YouTube channel. So you can subscribe. And once I'm doing normally, regularly, I'm doing lectures. Then once they were done, I normally, if especially it is a online one, normally I'm uploading uh, it into the YouTube channel, so then you can watch. So latest things can be notified. Is notified, will be notified if you have already subscribed to the channel. So I invite you to subscribe to the channel, then you will get the videos over the time. Right. So anyway, formulate the problem, then develop and validating the problem. So basically, so this is the systematic when you are doing a standalone review, not a background review. Background review is your second chapter. But so the both, for example, for the background review, you can simply do you can follow these steps, right? But when you are doing, especially when you are targeting the background review to publish, this must be done. This is essential, right? So these things need to be followed. Compulsory, you need to follow these steps, right? So one is the formulating problem. Formulating problem may not be the problem of your research, which is going to be done for your research. Basically, when it comes to the let's say if this is going to be researched systematically, then what is your problem? To find out the current knowledge on uh, gender stereotype change. So that is your problem because you need to investigate the current knowledge and you need to investigate the current gaps in this, right? That might not be your problem in highlighted because you are taking one by one in each variable to investigate systematically, right? So therefore, at least for the review, when you are going to publish it, so you need to develop a problem for each and every separate study and separate article. And for that, you need to develop a protocol. Protocol is simply something like a proposal, right? So I basically highlight a two-page proposal is enough. All the information contained in a proposal are depicted here in a table. And what you need to highlight, what you need to incorporate in the proposal is this. For example, there is a recommended guideline, PRISMA guideline for systematic literature review is there, and that must be followed. Article selection need to be done using those guidelines, right? So then searching, for example, if you are going to do a research on workplace romance, so the words you are entering into the databases or the Google are these place romans. And inclusion criteria, basically you are including articles from 1990 to 2023 year range that you are considering. For example, for the gender stereotype change, 1970 to 2020, I took, right? All the publications you would publish during these periods uh, included and others excluded, right? So you need to have a criteria initially before you are going to do a research. So how you can find out the year range? So that depends on your research. That depends on your research context, and that depends on your research area, right? So, but at least when you are when you are selecting a year range, at least you must have a justification. That justification need to be included in your paper. And subject area, maybe databases categorize different subject areas. And so I consider when you access Scopus or Web of Science. So let's say, for example, you are doing agricultural based HRM research, right? So then subject area, they categorize your paper under this agriculture economics or agriculture business management, right? So there are so-called specific subject areas which have been which may be different from database to database. So I have accessed this through Scopus database. Then Scopus database subject all areas, maybe engineering, the publications, the medicine publications relating to workplace performance, and let's say microbiology, agricultural, business management, accounting, and social sciences. All these subject area investigations were taken into consideration to include articles because all the, let's say, for example, engineering project, right? IT industry. Someone has research workplace performance in IT industry. So then that research paper is categorized under the IT subject area. So therefore, I took all these. So depending on, for example, you can study agribusiness sector only, for example, right? So then, so databases categorize different subject areas. You can determine whether take only the uh, which area, right? And keywords, workplace romance, source type. You are taking only the academic journals, not the others. You are taking only the academic journals because academic journals are highly reliable and valid rather than the conferences and other web posts and like annual reports and all these stuff. Academic journals normally follow rigorous procedure for publishing and selecting for the publication of a particular journal, particular article, research study. So therefore, we need to input high quality data. When you input the garbage, you get the garbage, right? So therefore, we need to make sure high quality research need to be selected for our review. High quality in the sense that high quality methodology followed. So then their reliability will be very high. The outcomes will be very high of your review, right? So therefore, when you input the garbage, definitely you must remember that the garbage will be up, right? So therefore, try to include high quality inputs in the sense that high quality investigations, high quality research studies need to be considered. How you determine whether a particular investigation is a high quality? There are tools to determine, right? So one is the empirical study. You need to take only the empirical studies. Empirical studies make sure that high quality methodology has been followed by the researchers. You need to manually review each and every methodology followed in their articles, mentioned in their articles, and you can determine which study included for your review or which study you exclude in your review, right? So basically, source type is academic journals, and type of study empirical studies or meta-analysis. We are taking, we decided to take only the scientifically investigated investigations. Not we excluded the opinion papers. We excluded the perspective papers, concept papers. We excluded.
Mr. Prashant, may I intervene a little bit? Extremely sorry, because we are not encourage them at this moment to publish literature review papers. Therefore, I would like if you can focus on how to Google, how to find articles, and as well as how to interpret. Maybe one, I would like if you can just introduce them to the VOSviewer software, something.
Okay.
So extremely sorry that because
no, it's okay. It's okay because we are having very limited time. Yeah, thank you so much for that. So likewise, if you are doing publication, so you need to follow these things, right? So basically, I will show you. So these are the frameworks that you need to follow when you are publishing, basically. So that's how you can publish. And so basically, I'm going to, as you were told in the beginning, at the very just before, you need to download articles. You need to find articles. You need to find the retrieve the relevant literature. So how you can do that, right? So simply you can access the Google, right? In order to, in a background review, basically, relating to your problem, you need to find out the related articles, publication, right? From the knowledge bases. What are the knowledge bases? Knowledge bases are various types, right? So one common knowledge base is the databases, research databases, right? So we have famous research databases, but unfortunately we don't have the access due to this crisis. But so we can have a free database which is called lens.org, right? And as you all know, we can have the Google Scholar, right? Google Scholar is not a database; it's a search engine. But almost all the papers which are in databases available in Google in most of the time, right? So therefore, when you Google it, you can find the article. But the problem is access is not given. Only you can access the abstract only, right? In that case, there are people have found various shortcuts to find the articles, and so you can find the full version of an article through your external links, like a friend who is living in another country, another university outside, then through them you can get them those articles, right? Anyway, so I will tell you a method how you Google it and how you lens it, right? So using the software like reference management software, and these things can be uploaded into a software called VOSviewer. And so this VOSviewer software has been developed to graphically map the current knowledge. So as I told you, in a literature review, we are supposed to find out what is the common knowledge and what are the gaps prevailing. So those common knowledge and gaps are mapped by this VOSviewer software. So what we are supposed to do is we can simply download the article set through Legs and Google, and that article set need to be reviewed. We need to exclude the garbages. We need to include high quality articles. For including high quality articles, we can follow this type of a protocol like here. So basically, at least you can consider empirical articles. I recommend you to consider only the empirical articles, right? If there are no empirical articles, in that case, you can consider dissertation, unpublished gray literature, right? But my recommendation is to take only the empirical investigations because they have a high reliability and validity. So therefore, so take those high quality publications, research into your review. So how you can do that? Simply determine by looking at the methodology if a particular study has followed scientific analysis technique using a big sample, then you can take, even it is a qualitative research study, maybe sometimes in vivo or something like similar softwares can be used, and we have a methodology to follow the qualitative studies. So if such methodology has been followed and very good high quality qualitative research methodology is followed, then in that case those articles can also be taken into consideration. So both empirical, quantitative, and qualitative studies are recommended for systematic literature review. So therefore, take those only. Others you can exclude, right? So how you can do that? This now you can simply go to the Google and can go to Google Scholar. In Google Scholar, you need to at least basically you need to log into your Gmail first. Then your account will be appeared here. So in this, simply you can type workplace. Suppose this is my search query. That's what I'm going to investigate. So here you can see 265,000 results generated within 18 seconds, right? So we have so many garbage here. So we need to exclude. We need to take high quality articles. How you can do that? So we can screen it to a manageable number at the same time, and at the same time we can take we are screening the garbage, right? Garbages. So how you can do that? Simply advanced search, workplace Roman, copy this one and paste here with the exact phrase, right? So we are taking only the studies which mention only not the workplace, not the Romans. We are taking all the articles which are talking about workplace Romans. And here, not anywhere in the article, we are basically taking, since there are a lot of articles, nearly 265,000. So we are taking the articles which, because in order to reduce, because it takes so much time to review it, to look at each and every one by one, their methodological review. Therefore, in order to reduce the number, we are taking the articles which has the workplace Roman in their title, right? So you need to click this one and you can simply give a year range. So you are taking, since the workplace Romans is a new topic in the academia, in the human resource management area. So now you can simply take with this justification. So you can search for and which year this concept was emerged. And by taking, so through Googling it, simply you can find out the emergence of a particular concept. I'm taking from 2015 to 2023, right? Latest publication, last, let's say, last 5 years publications, and searched. So now it took 61 documents, right? Now 61 is manageable one hand, right? That may not be a justification. That must not be a justification, right? But you must have a strong justification why you are reducing, why you screened out, why you exclude, right? So with strong justifications, basically. So this is, I think, more than enough. And so during this period, these are the publications. Now you need to find out, you need to export these things into the reference manager. For that, you need to open the Mendeley, right? So you need to open the Mendeley. The Mendeley open installation guide is there in the handout. And I have already provided the handout to the professor. She will provide the handout, PDF version to you, and simply by clicking the links provided, simply you are dragged into the relevant sources, and you can watch the videos and you can install all all the softwares into your computer, right? So here this is the connector, and Mendeley connector, web importer. So that can be this is a Chrome extension, and so you can, it's being processed now. You need to first open this. So this is the Mendeley offline version, Mendeley software, reference manager software. That need to be installed into your computer, offline version. And at the same time, they are maintaining a manual online version as well. So Mendeley has two versions, online version and offline version. So this is the offline version, and you need to log into that. And I have already logged in, and you need to minimize it, right? And you need to refresh this one first, and simply click this one. Please remember, you need to refresh always, right? So otherwise, the Mendeley does not detect the content. So you need to sign in first. I have logged out the web version. There is a problem. So anyway, so I have a video on this already uploaded. You can watch this. I don't. I'm having a problem with sign in. Maybe sometimes the server error.
Dr. Prashant, we have already conducted a session on how to download articles to the Mendeley and Sotero software.
Okay.
I think they have basic knowledge, and so I think it's better if we move for the
okay.
because VOSviewer is something new to them.
Okay.
Maybe some of them have known already, but it's better we can.
Okay.
Because
okay.
we have only 10 minutes to complete.
Yeah. So then, so you simply sign in. Then all these content is detected in this menu, and then there is an option to select all these things, and you can once this is selected, automatically everything this content is dragged into the Mendeley software, right? So that is normally done, and so once it is done, so if you have 2 pages, then 4 pages, page by page, the same process need to be done, right? By clicking this one and all these things. And you can watch the how it is done in my videos. There are videos on that in the channel. Right. So now, so let's assume this one is this is the one we exported, right? By synchronizing, the online version is the online item sent already saved into this offline version as well. Suppose this is workplace Romans, I have already done it for you. test version. So suppose that these are the items that have exported into this, imported into this. Now what you need to do is simply you can uh, uh, check all by using the keyboard Control A by pressing 1 and press on one item, click on one item and press the Control A button, then select all, then you can simply update all these details. Once update the details, then automatically all these content is updated. Right? Try to then you need to screen it out manually. Screen it out based on your what do you call this? Based on your protocol inclusion criteria. So you need to manually check each and every article. Basically, how you can do this is by going through the abstract, right? In cases sometimes abstract does not provide sufficient information about the methodology. Then in that case, you need to go to the full article. Full article is available on this URL. If there is no, you need to find a mechanism to find out the full article, right? So, and basically you need to try to make sure, the author keywords are there. So each and every item, right? So in this case, author keywords field, right? So for each and every one, you need to check. Right here, you see there is no other keywords detected from the web. Then automatically it has not been detected. Then in that case, you need to go to this article manually. There is, I think, URLs are also not detected. In that case, type the title and Google it. Find the article and manually fill the both the keywords. Right. So this need to be done essentially in order to run the VOSviewer, because we are going to run the keyword concurrence analysis. It tells something. I will tell you later on. So need to be updated, and all these need to be exported as an RIS file then after screening it out. So you can, let's say, one article you determine article is not, is a garbage, for example, not followed a very good methodology. Then you simply delete it, right? You can remove from the folder, right? So you can simply remove from the folder. Unnecessary articles can be deleted and most relevant high quality articles can be retained. And those need to be exported as a RIS file, right? So you have this RIS file format. So select this file and select this one and save in a relevant location. I have done it for you. Workplace Romans RIS from Mandalay. This is the file. And suppose this is the file. Once you click this, and you might have this type of a file appear on the relevant folder. So now let's say this is the file. Now what you need to do is you need to directly go to the VOSviewer. You can Google it. VOSviewer download. So then you are dragged directly to their official website. So you can download from their website. The latest version is 1619 that can be downloadable. So you can download here, right? So for the Microsoft Windows, Mac operating system, so others, there are 3 versions. They're using Microsoft. Click this one and download, right? So once it's downloaded, it's a 2-step process, very easy to download and install. Then simply you can VOSviewer. You have that in your computer, and now open. So here you have these options. On the left, you have create button that you need to, once this is create button is clicked, then you have three options, three buttons. In that, you need to create the middle, check the middle one, because we are taking the bibliometric information, and click next. In that, bibliographic database files you are using, not that one, because we are not using databases. You are using the reference management files, RIS files. Then click this one, second one, then press next button. Then you need to select the relevant file. Right? So let's, this is the file, and you need to click the next button. And you need to select the co-occurrence, because you are taking keywords of, as you know, each and every article is having a keyword, keywords under the abstract normally, right? Keyword denotes a content of an article. Normally, keywords denote the content of the article. So that's why we are taking keywords. Then select the keywords. Then co-occurrence means, if you take one keyword, then how many times that has been co-occurred in the articles are investigated. Mathematical algorithm is written in this software to identify the number of certain keywords, occurred how many times, right? In the included articles. Suppose we are taking 600 articles. In that, the workplace romance, how many times has been investigated, and related content, related words in those articles, right? So then press next. And so you can increase or decrease the number of keywords. So the maximum time, so total keywords are 109 in this article included list, and more than 3 times occurred articles, minimum number of occurrences. Minimum number of occurrences of a keyword is 3, right? So which 3 times? There are three articles which are talking about more workplace, uh, 3 times or more than 3 times. Articles only, we have 3 keywords. Let's assume this one, for example, 2, 1. So 2 times. Keywords occur 2 times. There are 13 keywords. 1 time. Keywords occurred only once in articles total, right? Keywords occurred 2 times, twice, 13 articles. Keyword occurred 3 times, only 3 keywords, right? So therefore, I am recommending, since there are very few articles, you need to take all these things, right? So these are the keywords, and by these keywords, simply you can exclude some unnecessary articles. Let's say Pakistan, right? So Pakistan country is not needed, for example, in this case. Similar words are there. ICT is there. Maybe sometimes another author has been mentioned information and communication technology. Similar words. If there are similar words, you can uncheck, right? So then you can have this type of a diagram. So here you have the workplace Roman, right? And we have clusters. So clusters is a common theme address. So let's say the purple cluster, you need to find out by looking at the, just need to go to the relevant keyword from, let's say you need to find the keyword and relevant article and read the finding. And based on the finding, you can simply find out the common theme by looking at the all the findings related to each keyword, right? So likewise, you can do a thematic analysis and find out the themes, themes investigated. Let's say in this, basically, when you go to this, we have 18 clusters, 18 areas have been addressed by the researchers. This represents a cluster, which means that a cluster represents a common theme. You need to find out by looking at the findings of each and every clustered articles or the keywords. So you need to directly need to go to the article which mentions about deception, heterosexual. So the one by one manually you need to go to these articles and find out the main findings there and need to summarize it. By looking at the findings, then you can identify whether there is a common pattern. And if there is no any common pattern, again, you need to rerun this. This is a EFA, exploratory factor analysis methodology behind this rationale. So therefore, like you run the exploratory factor analysis several times, you need to, by excluding unnecessary keywords, you need to run this several times until you get a common theme, right? So then you need to find out the common theme, and those are the 18 themes can be found. So then commonly investigated areas on workplace romance are 18 areas in basically in your literature review. Basically you can identify what are the commonly addressed areas, and the most important thing is gaps. So gaps can be identified like this, right? So here you can change the colors, right? So here the color says common colors have a meaning, right? Blue area denotes no investigations into a relevant particular field. Here simply there is no any keyword placed here, right? So which means that no blue means that no investigations. Green says that very few investigations. Very few investigations. If you take, for example, this one, red says the most commonly investigated areas. Since the workplace romance is a common word that we were investigating, let's say if you take this one, love contracts, sexual harassments, all are in like red background. Red background says most common investigations. Blue background says no investigations. Yellow background says the moderate investigation. Normally, you need to consider about the areas, the keywords which are categorized or which are placed in green areas are considered as the areas that have very least investigations, right? So I will take this another example for this, right? When you take this one, so you can see carrier indecision is mostly investigated. Here you see this one. This is this one, non-productive coping style has not been properly investigated, which is in a blue background, right? So these areas, let's say, so this is a cluster, right? So when you take this one, this is in red cluster. This is blue cluster. When you go to this one, right? This is blue cluster. The same cluster, the same version, the what do you call this? Density visualize. This map is called density visualization. This cluster is this one. So this particular theme has not been, this is represented by a theme, and this particular theme has not been investigated. So then this theme can be taken for your research investigation as a gap, right? If you are taking theories, so if a particular theory is highlighting around this area, so this can be taken as a gap, right? So those are the things how you can identify the gaps, right? So here you can see this red area is in a green background. Maybe very one or two investigations have been done, very few, right? So then this area can be this the keywords which representing a common theme can be further taken into for your research. So that's what how basically you can identify the gaps, right? So I think the time is over. So if you need more information, you can watch my YouTube channel. There are some other related videos. And from this point, I'm going to stop. Thank you so much for the
Yes.
opportunity.